Hey Zaka family! Zaka is launching an exclusive membership platform to provide you with career development workshops, coaching, community, and so much more. Go to ZakaConnect.com and sign up to receive information on how to access early registration and perks. Hello, everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Eli Cherenfant, who is a human capital executive at CAA. Eli, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure's all mine. Pleasure's all. Our guests are going to be very excited to hear about the work that you're doing in the field currently. But before we get into where you are currently and the position that you're doing, if you could give us a little bit more of the cultural background, where you're from, family wise as well too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am originally from Boston, Massachusetts.
Okay. Beantown.
Beantown. Yeah. Grew up there. Moved to New York for work, and then I moved to Los Angeles about 4 years ago. So I did 5 years in New York, and then I've been in LA for about 4 years. And then I guess even deeper than that, my father's from the Caribbean, from Haiti.
Okay.
And my mother's, so I'm biracial, so my mother's American.
Okay, cool. Now you said Boston, New York, LA. Is there like a one of the cities or so that you feel is the best?
I mean, yeah, coming from the East Coast, I'll always have affinity and root for my home teams in the East Coast. But yeah,
Okay.
Boston is where I'm from. Always represent. New York is cool. I don't think I could raise a family there. Yeah, LA definitely. It feels like we should have made this move a decade ago, just because the quality of life we're experiencing now is a lot easier, and we just enjoy the outdoors and things like that. So yeah, I'd say I love them all, but I represent the East Coast, but my new home.
Okay, well, shout out to the East Coast, and I'm saying the East Coast is the best coast. I was going to say that, right? But another note, you said that your father's Haitian, your mother's American. Was there ever the Haitian culture like in the family? Was that a part of the background of growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's different because usually my mother would do the cooking. I think a big part of culture is the food, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
my mom was predominantly the one who did most of the cooking. My father every once in a while would cook. So I think my initial introduction to the culture was when he would cook Haitian food. But yeah, I mean all my kind of friends growing up were Haitian as well. So I think it was part of my upbringing.
Mm-hmm. And like, how did your childhood shape your career trajectory?
Well, I think just when you grow up, kind of in a not with a parent who's you're second generation, or you have a parent who's an immigrant. I think that you do a lot of you kind of serve as a middleman in a lot of different ways. I think you have to you understand the States because you're born here, and there's things that you learn earlier on that your parent may not know. So you tend to do a lot of talking for them and helping them with things than a parent who's from the country would already know. So I think in my career trajectory, that's helped me to negotiate and represent clients when I was an attorney. So I've had a natural knack for that, and then also now kind of similarly representing clients and in a similar fashion.
Now, growing up, obviously you were growing up in Beantown in New York, and obviously you're out in LA now. But like, what did you want to be when you were growing up?
That's a good question. I want to be a basketball player.
Okay.
Yeah, uh, didn't make the cut. I stopped playing when I was right before I went to college.
Mm-hmm.
That was my dream. But then, I knew I wanted to stay close to the sport. So I did go to law school and pursued um, a legal degree and primarily focused on employment, labor, negotiations. You know, disciplines within the law that were specific to becoming a sports agent, essentially.
Mm. Okay, okay, I see. And just out of curiosity for the listeners, what position did you play in basketball?
I was a three, so small forward. So I could play kind of with my back to the basket and I could face up. So I was, I
Okay,
was.
you was versatile. That's what I like. I like to hear that. You was versatile. That's good. That's good. What was like some of the valuable lessons that you learned from your parents growing up that you still like implement today in your career?
um, I think it's really, you know, just a lot of things in life are just about how hard you work and how smart you work. I think there's not a lot of things that are necessarily very complex to learn or understand, but it's just if you put the work into it, it will start to come to you second nature. So
Mm,
and it's there's a lot of information. So I think the thing I learned from them is there's always like life is there's always going to be a lot of different um, variables and things that are thrown at you, and it's how you control information. And I think it was the same thing with being an attorney or in law school. Like there's a lot of information, and it's not necessarily um, difficult, but it's how you kind of put all that information and store it in your head and put it in different buckets and filter it so you can understand it. And I think that's a life lesson, because you're always going to have things happening in life every single day. So how do
mhm.
you compartmentalize and kind of sift through it and continue to thrive?
What are some of the ways you do that?
Yeah, I think it's just being incredibly organized, and having a calendar and scheduling. I think
Mm,
has been the key. Um, I think it's taking ownership of the day. So and I started practicing this maybe 5 years ago or less. It's just first thing when I wake up in the morning, it used to be jump on the email, and that kind of put me in a reactive state for the rest of the day. So now for me to control information and just my whole mentality and mood, like the first thing I do when I wake up is I'll write 5-minute journal, which is a book that our company actually sent to us. So I'll do that, and then I'll do a cold plunge, which I just started doing a couple of weeks ago. Kind of just get my body woke up, go for a couple mile run, and then I'll come home and check my email. So
mm,
I think
mm.
just getting ownership of the day kind of helps me um, schedule and organize the things that are important, but always the night before kind of look at my schedule, what I have to do, and then jumping into it, my routine, and then accomplishing the things I have set up for the day.
Mhm. Now, was this something you acquired while you were like when you were in college and university? Like, could you talk a little bit more about like your educational journey? Like, what gravitated you to like the international affairs and like criminal justice and law?
Yeah, so I think originally I always had a real interest in travel and just other cultures. So that's what initially led me to international affairs. I did a couple of study abroads, and it was really just understanding, people and culture that's what was interesting to me, because I come from a multi racial background. So
Yep, yep.
I always saw kind of like my mom's side of the family or my father's side of the family, and very different, but at the same time very similar. So I think that piqued my interest to kind of explore that and go to other countries and learn about their cultures. And then criminal justice was, I don't know. I think criminal justice was more so kind of like my early on um, just interest into law, to be honest. So just kind of understanding the rules a bit more, the playbook of life. And I think also my school, criminal justice was one of the top majors in the country. So I wanted to kind of learn a little bit about it. And then, obviously it led to me going to law school. So
And what school did you go to again?
Northeastern.
Oh, Northeastern. That's in Mass?
Yeah, it's in Boston.
Yeah, well, Boston. Yeah, okay, Northeastern. Yeah, Huskies or something. Or,
Yep. That's right.
yeah, okay, yeah, the Northeastern. Yeah, I remember those guys. What were like some of the challenges you faced, after college? Before you actually like landed your first job. Like you got this educational background, you applied yourself while you were there at Northeastern, and now you're out of school, and you're like, all right, time to get this job.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think probably majority of people go through this, and it's kind of your transition. So when I finished college, like I had, so Northeastern has a co-op program, so I was able to get some real work experience while I was in school. So right after college, I didn't, I had like a small time job, but nothing that was gonna kind of be a career. Ended up traveling abroad. I taught English in Spain.
Okay.
And then I was out there for a bit.
That was after college?
Correct.
Okay. Yep.
And then I just started to figure out, what it is I wanted to do. And at that time I was like, all right, well, you could take the different exams to get into master's programs, or if you want to go to, to law school, you could take the LSAT. So I did all those things. And then I went abroad and I started to apply for schools, basically when I ran out of money. And I got into, a handful of schools. And then, once the year, accepted, once the year started, I went back to the States and started my law school.
And let's dive into that right there. Let's talk about law school. I know that is a serious journey. I know that when it comes down to law school, some people probably take for granted like how long you have to actually study. Like, and the I don't want to say the pressure, but the amount of studying you have to do for the bar exams. Like, how tough was it? And explain a little bit more of that experience for our listeners.
Yeah, so I think the thing about law school, so you gotta take a test to get in. And then you got to take a test to get out, essentially, because you have to, do well on your bars. You have to pass the bar in order to license attorney. So I think the hardest thing about school for me was to really wrap my head around, it's a different language. It's a different way of writing, different way of reading, different way of interpreting. And that is, it's literally learning a new language. So I think the first year curriculum is difficult because you're learning about, case law and the different rules and laws and so forth, but you're also learning how to read and write, like a lawyer. So I think once you can figure out how to reframe your thinking, then honestly, I think that, the last couple of years were, not easy, but they're, much more manageable. You also can pick your electives and your courses. So, you're focusing in on, courses that you're interested in. So like I said before, I had the opportunity to, take a sports law class or a negotiations class.
Okay, I get what you're saying, and still keep it close to the sports thing for you.
Right. Whereas in year one, it's criminal procedure and constitutional law, and so on and so forth.
So I can imagine when you passed that feeling.
I couldn't believe it, to be honest.
And how did your parents feel? Like, you bringing it back home? Were your parents able to go to college as well?
My folks went to school. My mother went to school in the States. My father, I think he went to a vocational school, I want to say. They both, I would say, they both had, advanced degrees. When I shared the news, everyone was very ecstatic and super happy.
But that's an honor to, when you study that long and you obviously you're banking on the test, you're banking on it says you're like, oh, my whole life is coming down to this one exam. So the
Yeah.
amount of pressure, and sometimes, like I said, when it comes to those standardized tests and just taking things like that, sometimes people take for granted like the amount of work that's needed for it. But
Yeah. No,
again,
and I think
it's not for everybody. But the people who are able to make it through and make it happen, obviously get those types of rewards at the end. So congratulations to you on that.
thank you. No, appreciate it.
Now, could you talk to us a little bit more about like that first job as an attorney after law school, right? So you go to law school, you get this amazing education, right? It costs a lot, right? And you're like, oh, there we go. It's time to pay this back right now. So like the first job as an attorney, like what were you doing? And like what was like one of the proudest moments for you?
Yeah. So I was working, it was a small firm in Boston, really general practitioner, but there were, it was a lot of personal injury cases, employment, cases, workers' compensation. So it was a small firm. There's only about, I don't know, maybe 5 attorneys, maybe 6. But one of the attorneys I worked with, he was also a licensed soccer agent. So he represented a bunch of MLS soccer players and international soccer players. So my goal was to get in there, learn the legal side of the workers' comp and personal injury and all those sorts of things, but also watch this attorney and how he managed players and how he was a part of that business, that sports business, and the contracts behind that and all those things. So I knew like that was the reason why I wanted to work there, and it just gave me an insight to that side of the business essentially. So it was interesting. I think having exposure to that and also the traditional legal side gave me the opportunity to be like, all right, well, I want to pursue the sports side because this is my interest. So then, from there, I kind of made a pivot and, moved to New York and started.
Okay. And I'd like how you kind of broke that down and how you said like there was that moment where you're like you're studying things that you're like, oh, this is pointless. I don't want to do this. Like, but then you get to the next phase where you get to pick those electives and those classes, and then before you know it, you actually get to figure out what you actually want to do. You're like, oh, I know exactly where I want to place myself. Like, but talk to us a little bit more about this passion for sports. I know you said basketball was a thing for you, but like, where did this passion for sports come from? Like, and it seems that like your career is always like as you finish that first section right there of your career in law school and the first job and stuff like that, it seems like sports and entertainment has always been a part, like a strong drive for you. Like why is that?
Yeah, I think it's so my grandfather was a theater historian on my mother's side. So growing up, I was always really immersed in theater or going to plays or watching movies from a really young age. So I think that's kind of where I got the interest in entertainment. And then my father was, he was an athlete. He boxed. He played ping pong, played soccer. So he was, always just an athlete and in physical condition and worked out and very fit. So from a young age with him, I was always, kicking the ball and playing sports and making sure I'm always working out. So I think that's where the passion for sports came from.
And it just bled into the next thing, one after the other.
Yeah, exactly.
And who would have known at a young age that it would kind of like morph its way into this? You're like, oh, you're just playing sports, but then you're an agent. You're representing these people. You're in law. You're with these people. You're like, oh my gosh, like it was just playing basketball. Now I'm actually working with one of the key basketball players or with a large company. In a sense, a large team. So if you never know what to expect, but the good thing about your journey, which I'm noticing, you kind of still kept that as a center and you followed it through. And as you kept on following through, more doors kept on opening, and it seems like a lot of the doors that came your way, you took on those challenges, and you took on those opportunities, and you made the best of it. And
Absolutely.
and could you speak a little bit more like currently about like what's your role like right now and what you do?
Yeah. So right now, we have a division within CAA. It's about 6.5 years old, and it's essentially it's an executive search division. So what we do is we recruit, C-level executives across the sports, entertainment, and media landscape. So, with sports teams and leagues, it's hey, we're looking for a CMO or a chief revenue officer or a president to run the organization, and then those clients will come to us and ask for our help.
Now, with that being said, like you're recruiting, some C-level
Right.
executives. That seems like a very hard or challenging job because it's back and forth. You're trying to make sure finding the right fit. But like, how challenging how challenging is it? When recruiting like a C-level executives for like these big companies, like how do you know they're going to be a good fit?
It's a really good question. I think you I think you need to, again, it comes back to culture a lot of times. Above all, in my opinion, I think there are a number of people who have the skills to perform the key responsibilities and what the job calls for. But a lot of times it's is this individual the right fit for the culture? So I think understanding that piece is it's strange. It's not something I think you can necessarily learn. I think you have to. I mean, sorry, take that back. I think it's something that um, you can learn, but by looking at and being a part of different cultures. So the first thing we do is really try to understand the organization, spend time with them, spend time with if they have a board or if there's an executive leadership team, go visit them and have the conversations and really get a sense of, what the environment is. And I think
Mhm.
that is key. Um, and I think at certain levels, if you're at the C level, a lot of times people will assume, okay, well, this person has the skill set to do the job. Then you get into the weeds, and that's all about whether it's referencing, whether there's projects involved throughout the vetting process. So there's a number of different ways that you can actually benchmark this person's ability. And then also there's, again, I guess the thing about working at CA is we have the luxury of being able to do additional layers of referencing because we work with, all the best agents in the world across multiple different verticals who work with, the different sports teams and media companies and so forth. So, for example, if I need to get a reference on somebody to run a production company, I can, make a phone call to the film or TV division with NCAA and, get some real insight and real intel. So
Mhm.
I think it's a people business at the end of the
Yeah,
day.
true. And I like how you said you got to study that culture.
Yeah,
You just can't just be like, oh yeah, it seems like a good fit. You got to really study, and I like how you're saying that you have to actually in like actually be a part of their culture, learn it, and then
right,
see if that fit is because this is someone's time, this is money, this is the livelihood of a company, so you or an organization, so you want to make sure it's the right fit. And I
right.
know that our audience that for just thinking like some of our audience might not know exactly about that recruiting the C-level recruiting like those C-level executives. When it comes to like compensation, when we're talking about C-level executives and the compensation, like to help our listeners out, like when it comes down to like reviewing and negotiation process, like what are some of like the important things that you look for when you're doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's compensation that is different at different levels, and I think negotiation comes down to what people's motivations are. I think sometimes people want to have a high, cash
Mm-hmm.
compensation. Sometimes people will prefer to, defer cash and get, equity in the company. Sometimes it's balanced. Sometimes organizations don't give equity. So I think it's just really understanding what the candidates' motivations are and what the company's motivations are, and there's all the other smaller incentives too. Like, can this person work remote? What's if is there travel involved? Are they on the road? Half the year, or whatever it is. So I think it's not. I think the comp is obviously a big consideration, but it's not the only one.
Oh yeah. Money is not everything, so it's like you got to find other things that are going to help make someone stay, or may importantly be like to really like engulf themselves in the culture.
Sure.
For from working from your experience of like doing this for so long, and it's being a part of for the recruiting, the negotiation and stuff like that. Like how it has like diversity, changed through the years when it comes to like executive recruiting.
You mean organizations looking to hire more diverse people?
Yeah. How is that looking?
Yeah, I
Because we're
think
talking
it's
about
definitely.
C-level executives. This is like the higher ups. Like this is big,
Yeah,
the big wigs. Like how is the diversity up there?
yeah, I think it's definitely you know at least in my experience, I've seen a greater push for it in the past, 5 years, in my opinion. I think organizations are hopefully starting to see the value that a diverse board, or diverse executive leadership team brings to the organization, and ultimately it moves the bottom line. Like, no matter what your bottom line is, if it's to increase revenue, if it's to bring more ideas to the table, different ideas to the table, you need diversity, you need different people to
Mm.
to achieve that. So I think it's something that you know I think is being more appreciated now. And obviously there's a lot more work to be done. But yeah, like if you look at, I don't know what the statistics are, but I would venture to say that more likely than not, there's not as many diverse people, running Fortune 500 companies or running sports teams, or
Hmm. Hmm.
than not. So I think that the trend is
They're
to.
more the players versus the ones or owning
Yeah, I think,
business.
yeah, and and there's a lot of content out there about even the NFL, the Rooney Rule, for example. There's not a lot of black coaches in the NFL, right? There's, I think, maybe one owner or two at this point. So I think it's how do we put rules into play that purposefully change that, and that's what the Rooney Rule was doing for the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's same in business as well. What are the actual practices that are being put into play that are helping to effectuate that change?
Now, when it comes down to like advice that you give, it seems like you're definitely very knowledgeable. Like, what advice would you give to an immigrant who has like the qualifications to be considered for like a C level role, but they don't think that they're qualified because they're immigrant background, and they feel like they might not be looked at because of their immigrant background?
I would say, I'd flip it on its head. I'd say that you're more of an asset because of that background, because it gives you have something different than maybe the other people in the room. And I think it goes back to kind of what I was saying. When you have a parent who, and if you're second generation, or sorry, if you're first generation or second generation, I think there are a lot of nuances that come with that. If you're the one from a young age who is has to interpret things for your parents, you're speaking to adults, and then interpreting that to your parent, I think that is a unique experience that not everyone has. So I think there are a lot of examples of things like that that position you and make you unique and make you more of an asset than not. So I would look at it and flip it on its head and say, hey, the fact that you are and do have these experiences make you that much more of an asset to whatever position you're looking to pursue.
You just have to find that company. I'm going to piggyback. You just have to probably find a company that's going to appreciate that, right?
Yeah.
That's gonna be open to receiving, like, wait, hold up, you are unique. You're gonna bring something different to the table, because you might reach those, especially at those high level positions. Is like, this is what we want: dry cut A and B. We don't care for C, and you might be in the C bracket, right? But finding those types of companies to kind of take that risk, and not even just a risk, but just open their eyes to like the endless possibilities by having diversity a part of their community could really make a difference. We are very diverse when we're in school, right? By taking those different classes and courses, but then when it comes to like corporate America, or it comes to like those higher positions, sometimes it's like, we're diverse, but we're diverse in two ways, right? And not in 10 or 20. So what is like, I know you're in a very competitive industry, and I'm thinking about it now. Like, what is like some of the toughest challenges you faced, and like, how did you like overcome it?
I think, in my industry, I think that the trickiest thing is, I think people are unpredictable. And, I think for what I do specifically is, I move people to different states, different countries, different positions, which entails a lot of times, picking up, moving your family, all different types of things. So I think the hardest thing to understand, and I think it took me a little bit of time, is that it's not easy to do that. You know what I mean? And I think that early on, I would have a deal that's it's pretty much closed, and then last minute, candidate calls and say, hey, you know what? Actually, I don't think I'm going to go through with it. And that would be something that I got to go back to the client and say, hey, this isn't going to happen. And money, energy is invested into it.
Especially when you're investing in studying the culture, and you just be like, someone says, nah, I'm good. Woo.
Right. And I think, so when those sorts of things happen, I think initially your knee-jerk reaction is to get upset, get angry, and kind of point fingers at the candidate or whatever it is. But I think through time, I've started to learn that, people are unpredictable, one, but two, you can't force someone to do something that they don't want to do. And I think for me, the easiest way to kind of overcome that is to just be able to obtain a level of transparency and trust with all the parties involved. And I think having a skill to do that keeps people honest throughout, and then there's really no surprises. And I think that's something you learn with time. At least something that took me a little bit of time to learn.
Experiences, time. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, because everyone wants the best case scenario for everyone, and a lot of times I think you can get tunnel visioned and just trying to make a match, and your job's done, but you're not seeing kind of the ins and outs. For example, if the candidate has a old parent that they're taking care of in California, and the job calls for them to move to New York, that's a big consideration for them. You know what I mean? So instead of being like, oh, well, this is a great opportunity and all those sorts of things, you got to be sensitive to kind of what's happening in their real life.
Well, Eli, man, I just want to say, is there any last words you want to kind of share with our listeners this evening?
Last words, nothing specifically. I think, again, I would just reiterate that being an immigrant, or being first generation in the States is an asset, and I always think it's important to look at it like that. And I think it's important to look at what you may not see initially as the unique circumstance is a very unique circumstance, and you should use that training and innate ability to further your career and use those skills in your career, because it's not something that everyone gets exposure to.
Well, I appreciate all your words and everything that you have shared with us this on the show today. Eli, thank you so much for just joining us. And it's like, again, sharing your journey and expressing those good times, those bad times, your educational background. I think that's very helpful, to let, education was a very big component in regards to you finding exactly what you wanted to do. And I love how you tapped in deeply to the whole thing about like sports has always followed you and you kind of found another way to kind of highlight sports after you decided that you didn't want to continue it on at a higher level. You were like, look, but I still wanted to be a part of my life, and that's a good thing. Sometimes people kind of push those things to the side. They're like, well, that was 5 years ago, right? No, but you kept it going, and now you're at a place right now where look what you're doing. You're doing some big things, working with some major companies, some organizations, and just being a part of an industry that's constantly growing, and diversity, like you said, is definitely coming. There's a lot more growth to happen in there, but I'm glad that you're a part of that growth and stuff. So just want to let the listeners know, like, if you want to hear more inspirational stories like Eli, please check us out on ZakaConnect.com. Follow our social at Zaka Connect and follow our feed, Zaka, wherever you listen to your podcast.